For those who have registered for the event, I will be sending around a link to the recording. With that, thank you for joining. Yep. And so, as you guys will notice, this is in the Bevy platform. There are a few things. You see that there's a general chat room in here. There's also a tab at the top called Q&A, which I will start now. And I thought there was a way for me to publish a survey, but maybe not. Bummer. I thought it was a way to do that. Anyways, right, I'm sorry, I was just getting all sorted out with the Bevy platform here. So yes, there's a general and there's a Q&A and there's also DM. So if you need to send me a message directly, you can use the DM platform, the DM tab up at the top. There's also a Q&A section where if you have questions throughout and you want to put them there, either I'll try and answer them if I happen to see it, or if others who are in attendance want to check it and answer, please feel free to. So with that, let's start Pardot 101. So the agenda for this conversation, this presentation is going to be some introductions and disclaimers, followed by some Pardot history, a look at what Pardot is, the Pardot Salesforce relationship, some use cases and some organizations or some brands and companies that currently use Pardot, and then dipping into the Pardot app itself to do a little click tour and kind of show off what it is that people see when they're in the platform every day. And then we'll wrap it up with some questions. My intention is for this to be about a 1 hour presentation, so wrapping up a little after 6:30 p.m. Eastern. So let's start out with some introductions and disclaimers. That's me. My name is Ben Lamoth. I'm a Pardot Solutions Architect with Demand Gen, based in the Tampa, Florida area. I work as a consultant and an architect for clients in the United States and abroad, managing and developing and helping them to get the most out of their Pardot investment across the board, from simple stuff like implementations to more complex integrations and things of that nature. And Demand Gen it's been around for about 15 years, maybe more, focused on marketing technology, implementation, management, campaign ops, helping companies develop their demand funnel, their lead gen funnel, and things of that nature. Check out demandgen.com for more information. So let's look at some Pardot history. First, I want to start off the bat by saying that Pardot is pronounced Pardot, as I've been saying several times. I know that there are people who like to call it Pardot, and I totally get that inclination, because the OT suggests that it's maybe a French pronunciation, but in fact it is Pardot, and its origins comes from the Latin verb meaning to sell. Pardot was launched in 2007 in Atlanta, Georgia, by David Cummings and Adam Blitzer. I read that David Cummings has a pretty robust timeline of Pardot's history in getting into a lot of detail. And on it, one of the first things it says is that he bought the Pardot domain, pardot.com, for like $8 at the beginning. Domains are pretty cheap, but in the bigger picture, in the bigger scope of the whole of kind of who they are and what they've become, that was a pretty lucrative $8 investment. So they were launched in 2007. They had a lot of success. They grew and eventually became the number one workplace in Atlanta. Over time, as Pardot grew and started hitting revenue goals and became kind of more prominent player in the market, there was a company called ExactTarget out there. ExactTarget, for some of you may know or familiar with, that's what Salesforce Marketing Cloud started out as. Salesforce didn't develop Salesforce Marketing Cloud; they bought it. they bought a company called ExactTarget that was the marketing cloud that we have today. And at that time, ExactTarget also was invested and bought Pardot, and that was in 2012. I think it was less than 9 months later, after ExactTarget bought Pardot, Salesforce then came around and bought ExactTarget. So sometimes you'll hear people talk about pre and post acquisition. And so what that means is that basically Pardot was a standalone. Had a whole different, it wasn't using the Pardot, the Salesforce color scheme. It was like orange and blue or something like that. It was very strange and I've also seen it be like various shades of blue. But yeah, it's so they became part of Salesforce, and it still had the same app, that same blue app interface that if you've seen it before, it's standalone. And then it wasn't until 2018 that Salesforce got itself together and put together what is known as the Pardot Lightning app, or shorthand PLA, or Pardot for Lex, the Lightning experience in Salesforce. That was in 2018, and now in 2021, there's a lot happening. Up until very recently, Salesforce was pushing 6 updates a year to Pardot, which is a lot, and now they're coming more in line with how Salesforce does their updates, where it's, I believe it's 3 times a year. But within those updates tend to be pretty significant and consequential. A lot of really cool features and functionality. So what Pardot is. So this is how I was on a call not long ago with someone from Pardot, and they were talking about how they describe Pardot to potential customers. This is someone from Salesforce, and they kind of summed it up as Pardot is marketing automation used for enabling a sales force that operates in Salesforce. Even more granularly, a B2B sales organization, someone who has leads that are working on developing leads. If they operate out of Salesforce, if they spend their entire day in Salesforce working leads and creating opportunities and things like that, Pardot is an extension of that. Pardot is a fully functioning arm of Salesforce in that way. It is currently, as I said, in 2018, it's a native Salesforce application with the Pardot Lightning experience. And unlike Marketing Cloud, which is multi-channel, it includes email. Marketing Cloud includes email, SMS, which is text messaging, and push notifications from mobile apps. Pardot is pretty exclusively focused on email marketing. That's really the main channel. There are ways to try to integrate other tools, other channels, but it's not a native integration in that way. It is pretty focused on, from an outbound perspective, pretty focused on email marketing. How they describe it on the how they describe it on the website is that it helps organizations achieve sales and marketing team alignment, and it's geared towards lead generation, nurturing, and revenue growth. And I'll kind of explain that a little more thoroughly on the next couple slides. So I wanted to include this slide because this is meant to kind of give you a sense of the different kinds of organizations, different kinds of brands and companies that are currently Pardot customers. There are, and as you see, it kind of runs the gambit. You've got SPCA all the way down to Roku. I've got Zoom, Equifax, and this is just obviously a small collection. These are the ones that I was aware of, or was able to do some kind of last-minute research. And the reason why that's kind of such a wide array is that Pardot is geared towards B2B. It works very well with B2B nonprofits and higher education organizations. And the reason is that Pardot's best use case is around nurturing. It's around kind of less one-to-many engagements and more customized, personalized nurturing to try and get someone to do something. So use cases for Florida Atlantic University, and I just know this because I had some involvement in this. Their specific Pardot use case was around nurturing transfer students, because it's, if you think about it, it's kind of a B2B model. It's, you have people who are leads; these are potential transfer students, and you have Florida Atlantic University trying to nurture them to decide to become transfer students at Florida Atlantic University. So the opportunity, the closed one, is that lead, that potential that potential transfer student a um, becoming a enrolled transfer student. So that's an example. So there's Zoom. It's around nurturing and it's around engaging a very specific audience to do something very specific to get them to um, uh, across a specific line. These companies likely have Pardot plus other platforms. Like, I imagine that, like, for example, United Airlines, Pardot is likely a kind of a small part of their larger marketing operations uh, tech stack, geared towards a very specific segment of their audience. Um, Same thing for probably Valpak. Um, and you'll notice that I have Amazon on here because Amazon is obviously massive, and they have several different marketing technology platforms. I included this version of the Amazon logo because the job postings that I've seen that specifically call out Pardot as a job as part of the job description are people that are involved in the part of the Amazon business where Amazon is engaging with people that own. I'm sure you've seen them, those kind of dark, those like charcoal vans. People will, that's their business, and they operate to deliver Amazon packages. And so Pardot is used to engage and stay in touch with that specific subset of their larger customer base, people who are owners of um, businesses that are part of this Amazon delivery network. Um, Whereas there's other parts that are more enterprise level that are probably on like a marketing cloud or another competitive product. Um, so they have very specific use cases. I know Slack has both marketing cloud and Pardot. A friend of mine works there, and she manages both of them, and they have very specific use cases. Um, so that's just something to remember and to keep in mind, is that Pardot is geared towards B2B, nonprofits, and education, but it can also, and it has some ability to do some B2C. But it's usually, people who buy it are usually because it's serving a specific goal that kind of fits within that definition of Pardot and Salesforce. Um, that's not the only thing that they're using. They have other tools that they're using that serves broader goals, but for this niche requirement, this very narrow requirement, Pardot works very well. So this is a slide. I realize that this is kind of a lot to take in, um, but really, I wanted to include this slide to kind of give you a sense of how Pardot and Salesforce work together, what the relationship is like. On the top, you see this tan image here. This is, consider that's all Pardot. Campaign, prospect, account, object, opportunity, all that is in Pardot. And then the blue part is everything that's in Salesforce Sales Cloud. So these two things, and you see there's the arrows just going up and down. So this is meant to kind of illustrate how integrated Pardot and Sales Cloud really is. And one really can't function well. I mean, Pardot can't really function well or at all really nowadays with Sales Cloud. Coming in a couple weeks, it's not going to be possible to log into Pardot without a Salesforce login. They are completely pushed together. Um, Sorry, I had to look at something. Um, yeah, these Pardot and Sales Cloud are put together very closely, and all these objects, lead, contact, account, campaign, opportunity, all these things feed directly into Pardot. where a change happens in Pardot and it gets pushed into Sales Cloud. Rather, change happens in Sales Cloud and it gets pushed into Pardot. So this is just meant to illustrate that. And I have, yeah, Blake, this is great. I actually came across this. I can send this to you if you need it. It was in some partner education, and I was like, this is amazing. This is like, instead of trying to like create this myself, I'll just take this. So yeah, this is great. I'm sure I will use this a lot in the future because it explains it in ways that are fairly clear to understand. So now we're going to go into the platform. I have a DM in here from Jan. Do I have this? Oh, thanks, Jan. Yes, I have seen this. The Salesforce acquisitions. Jan sent me this, a list of all these Salesforce acquisitions over time, which is a lot. You see, there was, let's see, when did I say that was? That was in, so Steelbrick was back then, Cloud Craze. I don't see exact target in here yet. When did I say that? When did I say that happened? 2016? 2017? Or no, it was earlier than that. I don't know. It's in here. But anyways, yes. So there, obviously, Salesforce has a model of growth through acquisition, and Pardot and Marketing Cloud were obviously part of that. So now let's go into the demo. Right. So this is obviously Salesforce. When you log into Salesforce, this is what you see in Lightning. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Pardot, and you get into Pardot using the app launcher. I type Pardot, and this is what I see. This is a Pardot implementation instance. It's a demo instance. So it's not live. It's just, but it is populated with some demo data. So let's have a look. So when you log into Pardot, this is what you have here. Is you have a view of your database. Pardot is very database driven. The model for Pardot is the amount of what are called mailable people in your database. Mailable means that they have not opted out, they have not hard bounced, meaning they have not like you haven't sent them email and their server rejected it, or they haven't soft bounced several times, which caused a hard bounce, or you haven't manually opted them out. The out-of-the-box availability of your usage and limits out of the box for most instances is 10,000 mailable prospects, and that could be whether you are whether you've bought the highest level of Pardot, the second highest level of Pardot, or the lowest level of Pardot. Everyone starts with 10,000, and as organizations find that they need more, they will buy more blocks of contacts from Pardot, from Salesforce. They'll say, I need more blocks. I think they sell them in blocks of 10,000, I believe. But everything, so this is how everything is set up, and people will sometimes try to circumvent this, and it's hard and typically not recommended. So let me just go back to the dashboard for a second. So in this dashboard, you see it shows us how many prospects that we have right now. All prospects, it shows me the prospects that were created. So prospect is created through import, through conversion, or through syncing with Salesforce. A conversion, Pardot defines a conversion as an unknown prospect, an unknown who completed a form and then converted to become a known prospect. There is not a way for us to change that definition. Pardot is kind of rigid in that way, where it's not really, you basically have, what you have is what you have. You can't change the name of anything. You can't change you can't say, oh, I don't like conversions, I'm going to call it something different. That's not possible, unfortunately. It's very rigid in that way. And then opportunities created. These are opportunities that come from Salesforce. So if you have an opportunity you created, Pardot and Salesforce will sync in that way, where that opportunity association will be visible and available to see and to leverage in Pardot for automations and segmentations and things like that. You have a marketing calendar, and the marketing calendar can either be updated manually. If you want to use this as a marketing calendar, you absolutely can. So if I want to say test email campaign, I'm going to send, and it's sending on, let's see, today it's sending, let's see, 28, let's say PM. I'm going to send it at 10 PM. And I'm going to call it, I don't know, just use the default, use that color. I guess I have to use an icon. Let's use that icon, create it. Now it says test email campaign at 10 PM. So I can do this manually if I want to plan my campaigns out and have a visual representation of it here. I can. This will also populate automatically as you schedule and send emails. This information will be available. Will just automatically pop in on the date that it's supposed to go. Same thing for webinars and things like that. There's a section down here on the bottom left called Active Prospects for Review. And the concept of active prospects for review is, again, it's around this nurture, develop leads from end to end. And the idea here is that someone is active, they've engaged with an asset, with a web page that has a tracking code on it. And you as the marketer are able to see that, oh, there's people who are active. Let's check and see what they've done. So you can even potentially route them to sales if you need to. This whole idea of these people are active, let's have a look at them. That's why this is here. Identified companies. This is it can be a little misleading, but what happens here is if I click more visitors, there's nothing here because there really isn't I would say there's a demo here, but this is for your tracking code. So if you have a Pardot tracking code, it will record visits to your web pages. It's not nearly as dynamic as Google Analytics, not by a long shot, but it is meant to give you a sense of the companies that are visiting your web page by their IP address. So if the IP is associated to a company, it'll show up here as companies that are visiting your web pages. This can sometimes even be misleading if people are using their like normal public email providers or internet providers. This will sometimes show up as like T-Mobile, but it's not T-Mobile corporate. It's just someone on a T-Mobile network or something like that. And this will also show you here, it says create associate. What that means is, again, it's that unknown to known. So this person here would eventually, if this person eventually comes through and converts, then I'll be able to see all their information here, the number of pages they visited, the number of visits individually. But that's what I see here is it shows me identified companies. So the company being the IP address that Pardot is pinging back to. This is again meant to show you in a B2B kind of state of thinking. These are companies that are interested in the products or the web pages that we're hosting and we should probably look into them for the purposes of lead generation and lead nurturing. So I'm going to go into the prospects section here. In Pardot, everyone is a prospect. And as you know in Salesforce, or you probably know in Salesforce, there's leads and there's contacts and there's person accounts. In Pardot, everyone's a prospect, whether they've been a customer for 20 years or they filled out a form for the first time today. Pardot does not make any distinctions in terms of naming conventions. Everyone is listed as a prospect. That can be confusing for some people who have very specific naming conventions for the kind of customer that someone is. Unfortunately, much like everything else, that is not changeable. It just is. Everyone's a prospect. This is your table view, so you can see all your prospects. You can filter them by everyone who's active, anyone who's unsubscribed, unmailable, anyone who's never been active, meaning they're in your database but they never opened an email, they've never visited a web page, they're just there. Let's click into a specific prospect. So this prospect here, this is the view of every prospect record in Pardot. You have the content, you have their name, email, company, account, and source. The account name here is what maps back to Salesforce. So if there's an account, then this is mapping back to that account object in Salesforce because the account and contact relationship If someone is added as a contact in an account in Salesforce, that contact account relationship flows back into Pardot and shows up here, which can then be used for building automations and things like that. Saying, I want to see all contacts in the account named XYZ. It'll show me all the prospects that are part of that account hierarchy in Salesforce. Source campaign. So source campaign is important because Pardot is pays a lot of attention to that first touch source campaign. This can sometimes be frustrating for some people because it tends to some people feel like maybe there's an overemphasis on it. But the idea here is to identify what campaign was it that brought them into your Pardot database. Normally, if you have a form or anything like that, and you have your campaigns aligned correctly, your source campaign will be fairly useful. It'll say this campaign that this form was a part of. So you're able to identify and report back on who from this campaign, what kind of conversions did you get from this campaign? It'll say source campaign here, and this will live with this prospect forever, unless you change it through an automation, which is possible. Here we have prospect activities. This is a collection of everything that this prospect has done. The type, whether it's a click, a view, if there's any scoring that's been associated to that person for that action, and the date and time that action happened. You'll see here that there's a lot of activity that is recorded. This is really good just for being able to get a sense of how active or inactive someone is. And if you're needing to go back and do some auditing, you need to say, okay, this person filled out this form. That's good to know, and just for your own auditing purposes. You can also view their activities in a kind of a wider view if you need to over here on the activities tab. The next area in here is called Insight, and this is where you see the scoring and the grading. Pardot has a scoring and grading mechanisms. Score is how I describe scoring is this is an indication of how interested this person is in you. So people accumulate score based on their engagement with marketing assets. They filled out a form, they clicked a link, they opened an email, they clicked on an email, they downloaded a PDF. All these actions, as you see, landing page submissions accumulate points. It's generally best practice, in my opinion, to have a ceiling for your points, because if you don't have a ceiling, then the points don't really matter that much. They don't really have much meaning. So this is 254, and then a grade of C plus. A grade is how interested you should be in them. This is based off of the concept of the ideal customer profile. So you've got all these aspects of what is an ideal customer for your specific products, and you evaluate this by the size of the company in terms of revenue or number of employees, where they're located, what is their job title, what kind of products do they already have. These are all things that are information that you know about them, and you have these grades set up, this grading profile set up, and then you have automations that are running that will support these grading categories, where it'll continually look in the database, say, okay, this person, Naya, has a grade of a C plus, and her profile in here is the default profile. So the things that give her a C plus are that she meets the industry requirements for this specific profile, and she meets the location requirements for this profile. This is a 2/3 of a letter grade adjustment. So if she everyone starts at a D letter grade. So this is increasing her score by 2/3 of a letter because she meets the industry, and she's meeting the location. So it's another 2/3 of a letter grade. So that brings her to a C plus from a D. So it goes D plus, D plus, C minus, C plus, I believe is how it goes. So that's what gives her the C plus grade. And as you acquire more information about her and working in conjunction with these automations, she will then potentially increase in that grade. So the grade is a process that you typically have to go through with your sales team or whoever is responsible for identifying who your target demographic is, or who your target target audiences for your products, identifying what those characteristics are about them, and then having those profiles built, and then the corresponding automations to continue to look in the database to map them to the right people, to map them to the right criteria, so then Naya can increase from a C plus to another kind of grade. Let's see who else. Okay, we have Gerald in here. Gerald's a B. Let's look at Gerald's profile. Gerald meets the company size, he meets the industry, and he meets the location. So all these are increasing what started as a D, 2/3, 2/3, 2/3. You can have several different profiles for several different customer types, but it's all kind of ultimately down to the same thing: is you have your criteria that is evaluating whether or not this person meets. Let's see, let's look on the automations. Right, here we go. So this is an example of an automation rule that is doing what I was suggesting with company size. So default profile, employees is less than 501. So let's look at Gerald's employees is 10. So that's less than 50. That's less than 501. As a result, for the criteria of company size, it's set to matches, because this ideal customer profile is for people who have fewer than 501 employees. He matches, so he's getting that 2/3 match. And that's basically how all the grading tends to work at a high level. Is you have all these different automations. So I just jumped into the audit tab here in the prospect record, and so I'm able to see all of the different automations that this person has been subject to, all the automation rules that this person's been involved in. And so you see location, industry, and company size. They're paused, but they were previously on to affect this Gerald guy. So all these things together, he met the criteria for all three of these, and because of that, he started as a D and progressed up to now be to now have that letter grade that he has. And so how this could work is, let's say there's Gerald here. Gerald is not in Salesforce. Let's say that, and I know that because you'll be able to see if someone is in Salesforce, if this person is mapped to a Salesforce record by whether or not they have the Salesforce cloud icon right here. So you see there's just like, if I click on this, it'll search LinkedIn for this person. If I star this person, then it's going to say this person is particularly important. It's going to kind of rise him to the top of any of my tables. And then there's this cloud icon. This would say this person is in Salesforce. I click this icon and it takes me to Salesforce. But Gerald is not in Salesforce. Something that could be built here is to say, okay, automation rule to look for anybody who has a grade of C plus or higher and a score of 90 or higher. Assign them to someone, let's say me, and if they're assigned to me and my user record in Pardot is mapped to a corresponding Salesforce user record, that will enable Gerald to now be created in Salesforce. Record creation between Pardot and Salesforce depends on this right here, user assignment, whether it's a direct user assignment, like saying, okay, assigning to Ben is going to create it. There's other ways to do that as well, but for the purposes of this conversation, if there's an automation rule that says this person meets this minimum criteria where sales should be involved, there's an automation that will run that says, okay, add Ben, assign Gerald to Ben, and that act is going to then push Gerald into Salesforce. So let's look here and let's assign to me. And now you see there's a Salesforce cloud. I click, and now Gerald exists as a lead in Salesforce. And I scroll down to the bottom, and I see the CRM lead ID is right there, and the record type is lead. So that is what drives the ability to take a record from Pardot and push it into Salesforce, is ownership. So I'm going to kind of toggle off of prospects, and I want to look at. Actually, what I'm going to look at something that's actually pretty important. It's a concept of campaigns. So you see here that there's two tabs here for Pardot campaigns and campaigns. When I click Pardot campaigns, I see, again, the Salesforce cloud. The Salesforce cloud tells us that this campaign also exists in Salesforce. This is one of the more consequential updates that happened between Pardot and Salesforce a few years ago, called connected campaigns. What this does is this defers the campaign creation and management out of Pardot and pushes it into Salesforce. So this ensures that you're not creating it ensures campaign alignment. So what happens here is, so if I were to create a campaign in Salesforce, it's then going to automatically create here in Pardot. And I can then, when I go to create an email or a PDF or anything, I then assign those assets to this campaign and to any of these campaigns. And because of that campaign correlation, this may or may not work. I might have to add some, let's try. Let's see what happens. Oh, hey, it did work. Good, okay. So because of that relationship, activate. Because of that campaign relationship, I'm now able to access data on the lead record that's specifically related to this campaign. So I have this DM campaign that top customers. Over a period of time, let's say all time, I'm able to see that Carrie, Sarah, and Sophia all took actions. So there was form views and there were form successes. And the only reason I can actually see this is because of the relationship at the campaign level between Pardot and Salesforce. It enables visibility to certain um, dashboard elements that you previously did not have. So this is a very crucial feature, and they're continuing to improve and add to the functionality available here. But this is one of those tethering elements between Pardot and Salesforce that really pushes the integration between them two, where there's very little daylight between the two platforms. So I wanted to make sure to emphasize that. What I want to also talk about, I talked about automation rules a little bit. So I will kind of talk about them again real quick. So automation rules are very powerful, and they enable you to push and pull and move data around, both and it's retroactive, but it also is in real time. So an example of this, it's rules that are driven by either a match any or match all. So if I were to say, I want to look for any prospect in my database where their default field value for, let's see, city, or no, let's say state. That's going to be easier. State is, let's say FL, because I'm in Florida. And they're related to an opportunity. So I want to look for anybody who is this is going to be a contact. Anybody who is a contact role on an opportunity in Salesforce, and they are physically, and their record says that they're in Florida. For anyone who meets that criteria, I would like to add them to a list. Let's see, apply some tags and notify somebody, notify me. So this is going to run in real time. It's going to query the database and look, and it'll say, okay, anybody who suddenly meets this criteria, who comes in, the moment that they meet that criteria, all these actions are going to run. And everything's going to happen. They're going to be added to this list. There'll be a tag is going to be applied, and they're going to be notifying a user. Similarly, with your prospects, you have a limited number of automation rules depending on the addition of your account. So this is advanced. So in the advanced version, I have 50 automation rules that I can be using. Um, and Pardot will actually send you notifications if you have automation rules that are running that haven't run on anybody in a while. They'll tell you to have a look at it, to potentially update it or delete it if there's a because these things, if you lose track of them, can have potentially some fairly damaging effects. So keep an eye on. So this is important to keep an eye on. But automation rules are can be very valuable, and they can do a lot of really cool things, especially with all of the data that it can leverage between the opportunity, just being able to look into the opportunity at that level. Um, no, Blake, they don't have an undo button. No, there is no undo button for an automation rule. You have to probably create the inverse of an automation rule. I don't even know how you would do that necessarily. Unfortunately, no, there is no. That is one thing that Pardot does not have much of, and that is the undo button. I wish they did, but they don't. Um, so it is you are able to go pretty deep into um, specific things between Pardot and Salesforce, and that's very cool. You can look at the campaign, custom objects. This is all integrations that are not really available. The depth and the complexity of the engagement, the integration isn't really available at the same level for like MarketSpot. That's one of the things that really kind of makes Pardot shine. Um, so the other thing I want to show you guys, because I know that I'm kind of running out of time, and I obviously haven't gotten to nearly everything, but I wanted to also make sure there was some time for questions. This is the kind of the crown jewel of Pardot. It's called the Engagement Studio. So when I click on the Engagement Studio, it is a drip a drip um, platform. So it's a drip tool, but it can do so much more than that. It's not just for sending emails at specific times. You can um, you can do quite a bit. One of my favorite things to do is just focus on complex automations, because it's very capable of that. But this is an example of a top of mind nurture. So a top of mind nurture is for somebody, whether they're a current customer or they're a prospective client or a past customer, and you want to kind of just keep your company in their kind of in their mind by sending them emails over a period of time. So what this does is we have here a top of mind where I am going to click build so I can see it. I click here. What this is doing is anybody who is a member of this top of mind nurture list will automatically be added to this Engagement Studio program. I'm able to set the schedule for business days when emails to be sent, and the days and the time. So start time and end day, start and day end, and the time zone. Pardot is not able to do kind of smart sends, so the time zone is dictated very much. The time zone for when emails send is dictated by the time zone you select here. If you decide if it doesn't matter what time of day people get these emails, you can unclick that and it's fine. But let's just keep that clicked for now. So what's happening now is it's going to, the moment that someone gets added to this, um, someone they will then receive this email. So let's open this email. This is the email that is built in Pardot that that will be sent. The moment that someone gets added, well, not the moment, it'll be fairly quickly after they get added to the list. Then you see here this thing, it says wait. It says wait 14 days. So what's going to happen is this email is going to send, and then it's going to move into this next level, and this is going to wait 14 days, and then after 14 days, it will then evaluate whether or not someone clicked on, whether or not there was any link that was clicked in this email. If the answer is yes, then they get sent down the yes path to adjust their score. You can do more than just score adjustment. You have actions, triggers, and rules. One of the cooler features here is you can use what are called complex rules. This is fairly new as well, where you can evaluate, say, okay, this person they clicked yes, cool. Are they? Let's say, what do we want to evaluate on? Is their grade is greater than a C, and score greater than 60. So if these two things are met now, if their grade and score are met, then now you have a new yes. You can say, all right, notify the assigned user. It can do this programmatically. Notify the assigned user, and I don't know, let's say we don't want to, now we say, okay, now they're good. We send this, when we notified a person, we don't want them to be part of this email anymore. After this scoring adjustment, they've now met this criteria, and now they need to be re-engaged by sales. So now you notify their owner, and now you've taken them out of that drip. I've seen these get pretty involved, and they can, and the more legs it has, the more it can sometimes be a little overwhelming. But it's very useful, but it also has a limit. So this can have 200 running engagement studios at any given time, and that's a lot, in my opinion. I'm sure enterprises have hit that limit all the time, but that's a lot to handle. A lot of moving parts to keep an eye on. And similarly with the automation rules, Pardot will send you a notification saying, hey, we noticed that this engagement studio hasn't processed anybody in a long time. Should it still be on? That's very good to have. So I wanted to make sure to show you guys the engagement studio because where'd it go? Here it is. Because it's very cool. It can do a lot of cool stuff. I can actually say I want to make sure to use this again later, like right here, where every time after this score adjustment, it runs the same rule over and over again. That's a relatively new feature too. That's also been a big time saver. If there's certain redundancy about the process, then you can create and copy and paste steps in ways that you couldn't before. You can also run a test on this. So after you've built your engagement studio, you want to see want to make sure everything flows correctly. That's going to start today. Let's say send the email, and now it's asking me, was a link clicked? It's asking me which side do you want to see, the yes or the no path? I want to see the yes path. Increased by 10. Does this prospect match all the following conditions? No. Sending email again. Clicking link. Now they do. Notifying assigned user and end. So it's meant to show you how many days that this ran for 28 days from today to February 25th. So it's meant to give you a sense if you're doing campaign planning and you have several campaigns that are meant to run from day X to day Y, back to back to back, you're able to test this and make sure that it's going to fall within the date parameters of your specific campaign brief. I will also show you the email builder. There is a new Salesforce email builder for Pardot. I don't have time to go into that right now, so I'll just show you what there is today. The current email builder is okay. It can be painful for some people because it does not offer drag and drop, whereas you'll get a lot of that with MailChimp and HubSpot and others. It is is driven kind of by editable blocks. So when I click on this here to edit, why is it not letting me? There we go. So when I click on this here, it's going to ask, this is different. Interesting. This whole UI is different. That's curious. So I'm able to edit my images here to select my, I say I want to use this instead. I can set the width. When I come in here to edit my my text, the text is here. I want to preview it. So here's what this looks like, and so on. Maybe you have text versions. You can also run tests. There's for some of these, depending on the license level, you have access to Litmus. So it will run a Litmus test for you. It's sometimes not terribly fast. If you have a Litmus account of your own, it will be quicker and kind of easier to use. But as you're doing this, now you can get to sending. I mentioned earlier that Pardot doesn't offer any kind of like programmatic best time to send, and this is actually an email template, so it's not really gonna. Let's get out of this, and I'm gonna show you an actual email to send, because this is. Let's go back here. So I'm not able to actually. I can schedule an email forward, but I can't make it programmatic. So I can't say best send time or send it 2 p.m. Pacific, even though it's or whatever 2 p.m. Pacific tomorrow, even though my account is set up for Eastern. It doesn't offer that yet. Hopefully in the future. This is where you can select your list, your sending lists, and your suppression lists, your subject lines. You can add emojis in here if you need to, and so on. You can do variable tags. So you can hover over this and it'll show you what the email is going to look like. It also shows you your mailable prospects. So when I click the Facebook leads list, it shows me 84. But if there's any, let's see, I'm going to see if I can find any that have any crossover. So yeah, there we go. So I've got a list called Competitive Deal Nurture. I want to make sure that anybody who is on both of these lists don't get this email. So I started out with 84, and then I added Competitive Deal Nurture, and now I'm down to 74. So there's 10. There was 10 prospects that were overlapping. So this will tell me how many will actually receive the email. I can set actions when someone opens the email. If they click on a specific link in the email, either any link or a specific link, or I can also run completion actions if somebody unsubscribes. And then I schedule it and send it. So this was really kind of a very high level, fairly quick insights into Pardot. You'll notice that I've been in Salesforce the entire time. It is a Salesforce application. This is the Pardot Lighting app. So anybody who is using Pardot and is not having to use like what's called an identity license, then they will access Pardot by logging into Salesforce. And so now that we're just barely at the bottom of the hour almost, and there were some questions in here, so I want to try and get to those. Oh, there's a lot in here. Okay. All right, so let's start at the top. Beth asks, if a contact is entered into Salesforce, does that record need to live in Pardot as well, or can it be removed? If a contact is entered into Salesforce, it does not have to live in Pardot. So you do have the ability to, let's go into the connector real quick here. This is the Salesforce connector. I edit the settings, and I click here, you see customize connector preferences. Automatically create prospects in Pardot if they are created as a leader contact in Salesforce. So it really aren't many shades of gray here. So if you have this button checked, then any leads or contacts that get created in Salesforce will get created in Pardot automatically. If you don't want that to happen, then you need to uncheck that box. There are versions of this where you can get more shades of gray, but it's kind of an imperfect solution. Yeah, that's really, unfortunately, Beth, that's really kind of the best. That's really kind of the best the best solution. I've seen solutions where people have created integration, kind of hacky integrations called selective syncing, but it requires quite a bit of heavy lifting on the org side in Salesforce to be able to achieve. So unfortunately, really, it's kind of either they're in or they're in or they're not. But that would be the way to say I don't want to push everybody in. Then you can just do manual uploads if you want to into Pardot, export out of Salesforce and enter into Pardot. All right, so we have two questions from Kevin and Brandon, both kind of similar questions. How do you get experience with Pardot if they don't work for a company that has purchased Pardot? That is great question, and that is kind of a downside. Is that there are not free versions of Pardot. Unlike when you can sign up for a demo HubSpot org, but because of how integrated Pardot and Salesforce is, they don't offer free versions. And there's quite a bit of information on the Trailhead. It's short of an actual instance, but it tries to give you as much information as possible about it, so you are at least informed. If you happen to know people that can give you login credentials, then that's another good path. But unfortunately, there isn't, kind of like what Blake said. There really isn't a way to get into it, to kind of get your hands on it, unless you work somewhere that has it, or you have someone who is able to give you access. And yeah, so that's both for Kevin and for Brandon. Yeah, Blake, you're exactly right. The only way is to work for a consulting partner. Trailhead is best option. Exactly. All right, Kevin, how do people usually build careers around Pardot in the ecosystem? Well, I can just tell you how I did it. I worked for a company, and they decided that they were getting into marketing automation, and I was the person in marketing, and so I was responsible for managing the platform and implementing it, and I kind of just got involved there. That's kind of how it started, and jumped around different places and worked internally in a couple different places managing Pardot, and then as a consultant, and now as a solutions architect. And people seem to kind of get into it, similar pathways. They kind of fall into it, and become the admin and kind of the person who knows the most about it. So my recommendation, Kevin, is to try and learn as much as you can about Pardot. Go through all the trailheads. Try to earn the Pardot specialist certification. And when you're doing job searching, I would key in on that term, on Pardot. I do that. That's what I've done. When times when I've been looking for jobs or trying to help people look for jobs, and I know that they're Pardot people, I'll look for jobs where they're specifically calling out people who have experience who are familiar with or experienced with Pardot. That's kind of the way that you get in, is by finding a role, finding a job with a company that has it. I also recommend trying to get involved in the larger ecosystem, larger community. There's a really great Slack channel for Pardot. The Pardot community on LinkedIn is pretty active. So all those different ways to kind of grow your experience, short of actually having access to the instance, I realize is not super helpful, but that is what is available at the moment. And Monica Ruck, what kind of commitment would you say it takes to set up and maintain for a small to medium-sized nonprofit? So generally speaking, I mean, it's hard to kind of give you like raw numbers without knowing more, but Pardot is. It depends on if you're working with an implementation partner, then they'll give you a timeline based on your requirements. If you're going it alone, which I don't typically recommend because it sometimes can be little complex. It could be it could take it probably will take a few weeks to get it set up, to make sure, if you're going it alone. If you're, well, it'll also take a few weeks if you're using a partner, but there's benchmarks and there's a series of things. But maintaining it isn't that tough once you get your hands around the platform. Once you kind of understand your use cases and how to build emails and landing pages and forms, that's the training that the learning curve isn't awful. There are some kind of pitfalls, but if you do have access to an instance and or you're working with an implementation partner, part of what they provide to you should be fairly in-depth training, or train the trainer type help, because that's typically where people kind of learn, is by kind of doing screen shares and things like that with people. Jan, that's a great question. He asked, he's asking, do you need any IP warming at all? So Pardot out of the box is, you'll see here when I go here to, actually, I don't think it does, because there's no sending IP because I can't send email out of this instance. But Pardot, for all of the instances, I think except the top two, out of the box, they come on shared IPs. So that is something that you don't really have to worry about doing a true IP worm. When you move into the higher instance levels of Pardot, you start to have the option of having a dedicated IP. In that case, in that scenario, then yes, you need to do IP warming. But that is typically an a la carte feature. You typically will either pay. Well, companies will sometimes will buy that. We'll say we need a dedicated IP, and really the only reason to need a dedicated IP is if your send volume is high enough to warrant it. Typically, a send volume should be around 100,000 emails, at least 100,000 emails a month, regularly, not like 100,000 in March and then 10,000 in April and then 4,000 in May and then 200,000 in June. Like consistently high volumes, because if you're not at that level, then you may not actually really need a dedicated IP address. But everyone typically for the more popular editions of Pardot, they're on shared IPs. And how Pardot kind of polices that is they're pretty watchful around how their customers are sending email. So if you, for example, send an email, and let's say you send an email to 20,000 people, and your deliverability rate on 20,000 people is, let's say it's 80%. That is going to raise a flag with Pardot, and you may end up getting an email saying, "Hey, you fell below our high water mark for deliverability. What's going on?" Because they have a vested interest in making sure that the IP addresses that they're letting their customers use stay clean. If the IP addresses start getting dirty and start being misused because there's several customers that are using it, it can have a significant impact downstream on a lot of different things. So great question, Claudia. Their deliverability benchmark is 90%. So they look for a minimum of 90% deliverable on email sends. Typically, that's going to be like a higher volume that they'll kind of enforce that I've seen anyways. If you're doing 20, 30,000 and it's consistent, and you keep hitting these like 80 and 79 and 82%, you're gonna get a notification, and it'll be Pardot saying, "Help us understand that how you are complying with our policies," making sure that you are, because they have a permission-based marketing policy that you have to click every time you do an upload, and they'll ask you to confirm that the people that you're sending email to are aware that you're sending email to them and have asked you to send email to them. If you don't, then you're in violation and it becomes a problem. If you repeated violations of that high water mark will result in you guys losing your instance. Does it require double opt-in? No, it doesn't require double opt-in. Double opt-in is best practice. A lot of organizations don't meet that. There has to be implicit opt-in. So that's kind of a gray area. Implicit opt-in, something that you can look back and say this person opted into these lists and have some, and if pressed, be able to explain, have some proof to indicate why this person opted in. People will sometimes play fast and loose with it, and it's hard to know how, if you're on the right or wrong side of that, depending on how. It really just depends on whether or not Pardot decides to contact you and let you know that there's a problem. So let's go into general here. All right. LaDonna asked a question. I'm not sure if she's still here or not. She is not. Well, I'll answer her question anyway. So LaDonna asked that she worked in an org that had Pardot and Salesforce. Many of their contacts in Salesforce shared the same email address. How is this best addressed in Pardot for marketing activities to those individuals? So Pardot is a one-to-one relationship. Pardot doesn't offer like primary, secondary email address for contacting people. Blake sent. Oh yeah, so Blake sent this link that talked about AMPSIA, which is allowing multiple prospects with the same email address. That is how Pardot really manages that. Is enabling that functionality to allow several individuals to be using the same email address, for better or for worse. Sometimes that can be problematic. I know plenty of people who are very frustrated by that. But if you want to learn more about this AMPSIA stuff, Blake included a link in the chat. So feel free to check that out. And with that, I don't have any more questions in the Q&A. So we're kind of at time. So I will wrap this up. You're welcome. I'm glad you guys enjoyed this. And like I said, I'll be sharing this video I'll be sending this email, this video as a follow-up to those that registered. Well, thank you for joining, and feel free to connect with me. I lost my presentation. There it is. So where's my last thing? Yep, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, email me. Don't forget to stay part of the Pardot user group. And then also I do write occasionally for the Pardot Geeks blog. So I wrote something that I'll be publishing in a couple days as well. So yeah, feel free to reach out. But thank you very much, everybody, and have a good afternoon or evening, depending on where you are in the world. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.